We often glorify the self-made individual who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. But you know the truth. You didn't grow up fast. You just learned how to survive early. There is a massive difference between natural maturity and forced survival. If you cooked dinner at age 8 because your mother worked a double shift, or talked your father down from a panic attack while finishing homework, you weren't just a good kid. You were a drafted soldier in a domestic war you never signed up for. Today, we are decoding the psychology of the child who grew up too fast, a phenomenon clinical psychologists call parentification. This isn't about lost memories. This is the biological reason why you might be incredibly successful in your career, yet feel completely hollow and anxious the moment you stop working. Census data reveals that approximately 1 in 4 American children grow up in a single-parent household. This creates a terrifying vacuum where a stable adult should be, and inevitably, the most sensitive child steps into that void. The American Psychological Association distinguishes between instrumental parentification, handling physical tasks, and emotional parentification. In my analysis, I have found that emotional parentification is far more insidious because it is completely invisible. This is when a child becomes the therapist or the emotional dumpster for a parent. If you knew too much about your parents' marriage issues or financial terrors before you hit puberty, you were emotionally parentified. I honestly believe society does a massive disservice here. We praise these children as old souls, but an old soul in a child's body is usually just a traumatized nervous system trying to predict the next crisis. What does this do to a developing brain? When a child is forced to monitor their parents' moods to ensure their own safety, their brain locks into chronic hypervigilance. The default mode network, the system responsible for resting, gets hijacked. Research from the National Institutes of Health shows this pressure leads to chronically high cortisol flooding your neural pathways. Your brain was running a threat assessment matrix, fundamentally wiring your nervous system for high-functioning anxiety. You are the person who can manage a catastrophic crisis at work without blinking. Yet, you fall apart when choosing what to eat for dinner because your decision-making fatigue is chronic. There is a specific archetype that emerges from this trauma. I call this the high-functioning savior. You became a perfectionist not because you harbored a healthy desire for success, but because perfection meant safety. In your childhood mind, if you were flawless, maybe your parents wouldn't fall apart. You learned a devastating lesson. Your value is entirely dependent on your utility to others. This translates into an adult workaholic tendency that feels impossible to break. You harbor a terrifying inability to say no, because being bad used to mean the family system would collapse. We see this heavily in what is currently trending as Eldest Daughter Syndrome. If you were the eldest daughter, you were the third parent. You changed diapers and mediated conflicts. While psychology often discusses the fight or flight response, for parentified children, the primary biological response is Fawn, a survival mechanism where you merge your needs with the dominant figure to avoid conflict. In my deepest research into trauma, I have come to see fawning not as extreme empathy, but as a tragic erasure of the self. You don't actually like helping people to the point of burnout. You are biologically compelled to keep everyone pacified because unhappy adults were dangerous adults. This creates a devastating ripple effect in your adult romantic relationships. If you grew up parentified, you are statistically far more likely to attract partners who desperately need fixing. You might repeatedly find yourself dating emotionally immature individuals. Why? Because chaos feels like home. A stable, boring, emotionally healthy partner feels deeply suspicious to your nervous system. You enter a cycle of codependency, unconsciously reenacting your childhood dynamic, desperately trying to save your partner in the exact way you couldn't save your parents. The cost of this survival strategy is astronomical. Many of you carry a high ACE score, adverse childhood experiences. According to the CDC, 61% of adults report at least one ACE, but but parentification correlates with multiple compounded scores. These are linked to chronic health issues later in life, from autoimmune disorders to severe depression. The body keeps the score. I must be completely blunt. I see too many self-help gurus telling you to simply build more resilience. But I honestly believe that the commodification of resilience is a trap for the parentified child. You cannot outrun this exhaustion by working harder. Your overdeveloped resilience is exactly what is killing you. So how do we dismantle a lifetime of conditioning? The first step is acknowledging the boundary failure. In a healthy family architecture, parents are the large, protective circle and children are the smaller circles safely contained within. You were forced to become the big circle, shielding the people who were supposed to shield you. To heal, you must radically accept that no is a complete sentence. You are no longer responsible for regulating your parents' emotions. When you start setting boundaries, intense guilt will wash over you, feeling exactly like abandonment. But you must distinguish between abandonment and necessary autonomy. You are allowed to find sanctuary in your own peace. Recovery also requires reparenting your inner child, which is the practical application of neuroplasticity. It means treating yourself with the fierce compassion you so freely bleed out for everyone else. When you make a mistake, instead of activating the harsh inner critic that mimics your stressed-out parents, you must consciously develop an inner voice that says, "It is okay. You are safe now. You do not have to be perfect to be worthy of love." You need to actively mourn the childhood you didn't have. You were robbed of the carefree years where your biggest worry should have been a math test, not the fragile emotional stability of the adults in your house. You must redefine your worth. You are not a human doing. You are a human being. Your fundamental worth is not tied to the burdens you carry or the crises you solve for others. You are worthy simply because you exist. You have spent decades forging an impenetrable armor of competence to protect a terrified child. It is time to thank that armor for keeping you alive, and slowly, piece by piece, take it off. If you feel profoundly seen by these words, know that you are not broken. An entire generation is waking up to the reality that we were emotionally drafted way too young. But the generational cycle ends with you. By doing this heavy work, you ensure that if you choose to have children, they get to be just that, children. As Carl Jung observed, the heaviest burden a child can carry is the unlived life of their parents. You have carried that weight long enough. It is time to put it down. You didn't grow up fast, you survived. Now it is time to stop surviving and start living. If this analysis resonated with the deepest parts of your experience, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We are building a community that values absolute truth over temporary comfort. Share your story in the comments below. I read them, and your courage might help someone else realize they are finally safe. Until next time, take care of the child inside you.